Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here. Today we're going to be looking at update 3.7, but we're also joined by the developers of the game. Zekent and Sonata will be talking through a lot of the changes that they have in store over the next few months. I want to apologise, the audio quality on my microphone for this particular video was a little bit broken, so hopefully you guys can make it through. I've done a little bit of post-processing to make it sound a bit better, but otherwise, sit back, relax and enjoy. I'll put timestamps in the description below. Alright guys, 3.7 is coming up pretty shortly, and last time I talked to Niv and I had Sonata on for just a little bit. This time I've got Zekent and Sonata. Guys, it's probably a lot earlier in the day over in California, but how are you guys doing?
It's actually 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so not too bad. Excited to be joining you for this time.
So, I wanted to just start off by asking, there's been a lot of changes with Vainglory over the last couple of updates, obviously, massive introductions like PC version, and a lot of things moving forward. What's been what's like the overall design goal that you have got, sort of going forward, not only just through 3.7, but for Vainglory as a whole, going towards the end of this year?
I'm not going to speak so much about what we're doing with the entire product as a whole, but I would like to talk a lot about the meta that we're making in 5v5. We have a lot of goals that we're aiming for, and you'll see when we talk about 3.7 changes, kind of how we're moving towards those goals. And it won't be immediate. It will take a couple updates, but we're pretty sure we can make the game a whole lot better for everyone. Just to start off with, you have a couple goals in mind. First of all, less mismatch in the side lanes, where currently you have the weapon or buff on one side, which is completely, trying to guide where the meta is going. And that's really pushing weapon carries down in the bot lane, duo lanes in the bottom and whatnot, where you really have one person who's generally playing a top lane, which is kind of being pressured 2v1. It's not particularly fun for them. So we're trying to make a little bit less of a mismatch there.
Yeah, that's something that I think that's something a lot of people have been struggling with, especially at the higher elos. I think it doesn't feel very rewarding to play top lane at the moment, because you just become almost like a defend and clear the wave bot. And that sort of struggles, and not a lot of people find that role entertaining or fun to play. But what is it ideally like? What would be your idea of the meta that you'd like to see in Vainglory 5v5?
Seeing a pretty big variety in the top and bot lanes, where you have bruisers, you have range carries, you have tanks, you can have dedicated towards CC, or ones that are more geared toward damage, kind of being both viable in that lane and not just dedicated to clearing the wave. So having a little bit more variety there for both sides would be very interesting, and seeing those different matchups where you have boosters, you have range carries up against tanks, just seeing how those matchups play out is kind of the goal.
So just before we move on to 3.7, is there anything that you can kind of give us a hint as to how you're going to try and achieve that?
We have a couple things in mind. We actually have a lot more other goals that we have alongside that, so I'd like to talk a little about those too.
Hit those first, and then we can discuss that overall thing.
I think I'll just run through like the bullet point list real quick, and then we can talk about each one individually if you would like to.
Yep, sure.
So beyond less mismatch in the side lanes, we want meaningful resource acquisition. This means that not just like, sticking near your buddies, or this isn't that we're completely removing ambient gold or whatnot, but that being in lane is much more important, where last hitting matters a lot more. Getting those last hits in the jungle matters a lot more. Making sure you kill those objectives, making sure you take turrets and whatnot, getting kills on heroes and whatnot is incredibly important. Then making the jungle primarily for a jungler early on, especially. We don't mind that other heroes are taking the jungle later in the game, but the first couple rotations should ideally mostly be for your jungler. Roles should be more established and clear, where when you enter a game of Vainglory, especially as a new player, we want to make sure that you're able to kind of understand what you're supposed to be doing, at least at a baseline level. Where, like, as a jungler, you go to the jungle and you kind of have these few routes that are pretty good for you. As a laner, you kind of know where you're supposed to be going. As a captain, especially, you have a pretty clear idea of where you should be and why you should be there. And then active play. So we don't want you to... One of the ideas here is that we want there to have players be able to show their skill. And one of the ways that you show your skill is how quickly you can earn gold. A lot more gold coming from you actively doing things, actively going around the map, doing whatever you need to do to earn that gold is going to be a pretty big point to stay in lane. Currently, we have a pretty big problem, but it makes the meta a little bit messy, where you kind of shove your lane out and you just kind of wander off. So that heroes do have a little bit more incentive to stay in those lanes a little bit longer, decide to roam, it will cost them. So if you are able to wander off turn, you will be losing a good amount of experience and gold. We do want to make sure that snowballing and rubber banding both feel good, where getting snowballed, you still feel like you have a chance to come back far ahead. It shouldn't just be like, oh, after like a kill or two, your opponents are completely caught up.
So overall, your sort of design goals seem to be going forward, just so I can round that up, because there's a little bit of connection issues, because obviously we're talking like halfway across the world on Discord, so it can be a bit of an issue. You really want to give people the individuality in their roles, so they know exactly what they're doing with their role, but also that they could feel like they can have an impact regardless of which role they're playing. You want to be able to reward people for staying in lane, and also try and create a unique role for the jungler, so that it doesn't feel like the jungler just is there to funnel gold onto one of their carries or to act as a secondary support. And ideally, you're trying to create a space where the 1v1 matchups in lane matter, because that allows you to show your skill, and obviously then working with the what you're just talking about there, with the snowballing, rubber banding, to make it feel that you can snowball, but it's not impossible to come back from, and that rewards that sort of individual skill play. So really, you're tailoring it to a point where no matter what role you play in 5v5, you feel like you individually will have an impact, not reliant on the way that the meta shapes your team or what kind of specific role you're forced to play because it's the best thing to play in that particular sort of time in the meta.
Yes, that's a very good way of summing it all up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the right direction for you to kind of look towards, because obviously nobody wants to go into a game of rank 5v5, play top lane, have to play Arden top with Stormguard banner and say, well, I'm not having an impact this game, unless, you know, the only way I'm having an impact is if my carry does well. And that is not, nobody wants to be in that position. And nobody wants to be a jungler where you have all these wonderful jungle camps and rotations and gank patterns, but you never gank because you're 2v1 in the bot lane the entire time, shoving in the first turret. So I think I totally want to see that sort of direction for Vainglory, and I'm really hoping that that's the way it manages to go over the next couple of updates.
Absolutely, and honestly, I'd love to get feedback from the community. Like, I'd like to see is the direction that, you know, the top level players, or new beginner players, or even like is this a good direction for us to take the game?
Yeah, absolutely.
From the players is a really big part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are listening in YouTube chat or YouTube comments, just make sure you comment below. Is this the way you want to see the game go? What bothers you as a new player? What bothers you as a veteran player? All of those kind of things are really interesting, and anything that I find interesting in the comments, I'll feed directly back to Zekent and Sonata, so you guys can feel like you're having an impact as well, because it's always nice to feel like you have an impact in shaping where Vainglory goes. And unless you have anything else that you want to cover in terms of the overall structure, we could move on to 3.7 if you wanted.
For that, that's just short and sweet of it. We have a lot more ideas on how we're going to make all that happen, and I'd love to hear feedback on it in the future. Won't go too much into it right now, but we will be releasing more ideas, and you will see a lot of iteration over the next few updates. So it should be pretty exciting, and you'll see some right now as we talk about 3.7.
Yeah, so let's talk about 3.7. Obviously, I'll quickly run over the bugs and cleanups here. So Anka's Crimson Blade talent now correctly modifies damage. Fix the bug where Maline's Royal Favor talents globally affected allies. Fix the bug where Anka's standard blades locked her longer than intended. Catherine's Splash Timer angle is now more clearly displayed. Global gold and experience is now properly granted to allies. In 5v5 turrets armories, Vein Crystals will display invulnerable when hit whilst invulnerable. Stunning Ozo during his acro bounce will now interrupt him, which was something that's been in the game for a very long time, so that's a good bug fix. And updated most recommended builds to have a more generalized usage. I like that as well, because especially for new players, some of the sort of recommended builds that we had were very specialized and not so relevant in certain situations, so I like the sort of the more generic approach to sort of build paths, because that will definitely help newer players, especially. Most players like me have our custom build set, and we'll go into custom build and build what we want in sort of the right situation, but especially for newer players, having more generalized builds will probably allow them to be a bit more flexible when they go into the games. So yeah, those are just the bugs and stuff. And anything here that you particularly were really happy that you got sorted in 3.7?
A lot of these are just, generalized bug fixes, but I actually agree with you on the last one. The updating most recommended builds is actually fantastic, because a lot of new players, when they come into the game, they don't know what reflex block is. They don't know what a lot of the active available items do. I really wanted to make it so that a lot of the item builds will just work regardless of what you're bringing them into, and you don't have to have like a lot of specialized knowledge. You'll just be able to take them and run with it until you kind of figure out a little bit more of the game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the major points for new players, especially. All right, let's talk about the meta changes first, because these are usually the ones that have the overall intended impact in sort of the way that the game paces. I'll just run over them really quickly. Jungle monsters now take the same reduced damage from abilities as lane minions. So whenever you see a tooltip that says does 50% damage to lane minions or whatever, that will now apply to jungle monsters as well, which will kind of potentially limit some casters in the jungle, which might shape the meta a little bit there. You might find that some of those casters that usually would be very good at jungle clearing might now suffer just a little bit, but we'll have to see how impactful that will end up being. Okay, so all jungle camps spawn time is up by 5 seconds, 15 seconds up on the weapon and crystal guardian. And the orb buff always passes to a killer with a minimum of 30 seconds duration. Yeah, that's nice, because obviously it never felt good to get like a 5-second buff or a 10-second buff, so you can get it for at least 30 seconds now. Oh, Black Claw, when you
I'd actually like to talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, hit it.
So it doesn't actually drop on the ground anymore.
Oh, it literally passes directly to the killer.
Yeah, so now when you kill it, this is actually like a pretty big debate. The reason we decided to go with this in the end was because so many times and so many people did not even realize you could pick that thing up.
Yeah, I mean,
it's on the ground, it just faded. It was really sad.
It definitely sad. The thing is, this has got two halves to it. I see. Definitely better for newer players, because it's easier transfer. You feel rewarded for getting the kill on a buff player, and you don't have to make any extra movements. You lose a little bit of the tactical variety that you gain from that, though, in the higher ranks, where you could pass it to an individual player on the team that you really wanted to give it to for a specific circumstance. So it has swings and roundabouts with that, but I think for the generalized population of Vainglory, it's the better change.
Absolutely. And now when you do want to pass it to a very specific person, you really do have to make sure they get the kill.
Yes, I mean, this is in line with other MOBAs. I know me and Z can come from League of Legends. Well, this is very standard for League of Legends. So, it always gets passed over to the killer. And so this is a little bit more in line with your traditional MOBAs. But again, like you said, it's very important. If you want to transfer that buff, you have to make sure that it is going on to the killer. And you have to make sure if you can set it up properly, not always possible to do so, but if you can set it up to go over to that key target, then that is the way that you have to play those fights. This is the next big one. A big one. Blacklaw in ranges past 25 minutes. The damage goes up by 15%. The damage he takes goes down by 30% and gains movement speed as well, meaning he will stomp up that mid lane much quicker. This, I guess, is another attempt to make sure these games will end. Because I noticed something that you've always wanted to be pushing Vainglory 5v5 towards. You don't really want 40-minute long games. And so this Blacklaw is supposed to be a finisher past 25 minutes. Like, you should finish off Blacklaw if you take it when you get it past 25 minutes.
And this is more geared towards games where it's like both teams are very even and you just need that one little push to push it over to the edge. If one side managed to steal a Blacklaw late in the game, and the other side still has a lot of turrets up, this will not end the game. This will push a little bit further than it did before. But it won't be like a complete game ender. It means Blacklaw will continue scaling up past the point where he like hits max level.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it means, especially, also increases the importance of Blacklaw, because a lot of top tier teams often went for Ghost Wing over Blacklaw just because they felt it was more important in the late games, because essentially the team fighting capability of it was much better. But this makes Blacklaw a much more important target in the late game now, especially because, again, adds that extra finishing blow to capturing him.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's have a look at the basically base health of most jungle camps has gone up here. Healing Treant and Big Bear. What is the intended change here? Just to make it a little bit harder to jungle?
Twofold. It makes it a little bit harder to jungle, but it also means that the laners who are coming to take the jungle camps will have to spend a little bit more time, especially with the change to how jungle camps are taking less damage from AoE abilities. This now also means that if a Celeste decides to come clear double bears, she will spend, just a couple more seconds longer, and that will make it so she's not able to put pressure on the map as easily.
Yeah, so basically the overall, I guess, design ethos here is if you go in to invade those doubles as someone like a Celeste or a Samuel or whatever, you now have to spend those extra seconds, which means you end up sacrificing a bit more in terms of lane minions. You maybe sacrifice a bit of lane pressure. The enemy can punish you by pushing the wave in more readily. So there are now more options to deal with someone who looks to invade your jungle. And also the healing treant health going up means that if you're dominating an enemy laner and you go to invade their healing treant on their side, it will just take you that little bit longer to clear it, which could have impact on how the enemy clears the waves or how the map pressure is released on that side of the map as well.
Absolutely.
Let's have a look at structures. This is a big one. So this is I see that the first one is currently not completely confirmed. But the armor and shield piercing has gone up to 50% on turrets. And I'm sure that, I don't know if that's completely confirmed yet or not. It's currently highlighted purple, which means I think it's kind of being decided upon. Now deal consistent damage to lane minions. And that will slightly change the last hit timings. Do you know exactly how this has changed last hit timings? Or is it sort of just for players to work out?
Or it would deal, our turrets deal a set amount of damage through the whole game. And the minions themselves would get tankier over time so that the last hit timings for the minions were really changing. This makes it so that turrets, a minion always has a certain amount of turret hits before it dies. Okay. So it'll always be, range minion takes 2 hits, a melee minion takes 3, or etc. Where like it doesn't matter on which part of the game it is, the minions will always take the same amount of hits.
Now only attacks an enemy hero that's attacked a nearby allied hero. How is it? Sorry, maybe I'm just reading this wrong. How has this changed from previously? Would it? Oh, it doesn't switch aggro after the enemy that has cleared that turret, so it won't switch to an ally immediately after the enemy that it was originally attacking has left the turret range. Is that
yes, correct? So,
yes, okay.
Yes, basically before we had Guardian mode, which the turret will always attack enemy heroes as long as there's at least one enemy hero inside their range after it has been aggroed. Attack the hero that has attacked a nearby ally hero, and then it'll go back to neutral mode unless an allied hero is still being attacked by enemy heroes.
So this makes turret diving and coordination much easier for teams if they want to try and formulate that kind of plan. Because it means that you can start...
That is part of it. Granted, if you keep reading, it'll actually be coordinate dives now because you'll have much less time in general.
I see.
But yeah, I'll let you... Yes.
No longer deals differing ramping damage per hero, so it just means with consistent damage or percentage damage to heroes or whatever, it'll deal consistent damage across the board to anybody that attacks or is getting attacked by it. Generates heat when attacking enemy heroes up to 2 stacks. Each stack increases the turret's damage against that hero by 62.5%. So basically, if you are getting targeted by the turret, you're going to die a lot quicker. Is this the general ethos here? You can really only afford to take 1 or 2 hits before you have to get out of there?
Yeah, so the heat here just made, compared to our old heat, which was the ramping damage per hero, it would have, I think, a variance of like 10 different levels. We're simplifying it to 3 different levels. It's unheated, 1 heat, and then 2 heat. And when it's 2 heat, it's doing 125% of its damage to heroes. The difference here is that the heat is on the turret and not on the hero. So before, if you switched aggro, the next hero taking the turret no longer takes the bonus damage that the turret was dealing. Again, from the turret while it is still heated from a different ally, you will take that extra 125% damage.
So really, so despite the fact that it now no longer switches between enemies when they're turret diving, it does mean that if we do have this 2v1 meta in the top lane and you are the subject of being aggressed onto the turret, if you can draw aggro onto yourself and the enemy tries to dive you, it's much easier for you to use that first turret as an ability to keep yourself in a really safe position. Is essentially supposed to be that kind of early fortress to allow yourself a bit of breathing room in lane.
Right, so these changes in general will actually... So there's 2 kind of major changes that are going to happen here. Is one, early on, you'll feel a lot safer under turret. And this is going to be, pretty good for just general meta overall. Like, you should never feel like you can't defend your turret and you just kind of ditch it. The armor and shield piercing is confirmed, and that is specifically addressing for carries to dive a turret, where... Before, since health is our premium captain item, or a captain stat, captains are more incentivized to initiate turret dives now because the armor and shield piercing will be, pretty effective across the board, but the captains will be the ones who can tank turret shots a lot longer.
Okay, so really, if you're looking to force those issues, it's going to have to be initiated by your tank or your beefier members of the squad. Because if you are trying to dive 1v1 or you're trying to dive in a 2 carry versus 1 tank style lane, you are going to be taking a lot more damage early on in those tower dives, and that's going to be very detrimental.
Before we move on, I would just like to say everything that has a purple dot next to it is actually everything that's in the stock is confirmed.
Oh, okay, it's confirmed. So I'm not going to get confused because we're about to move on to a lot of purple dots.
Oh yeah.
The armory regenerates 3 minutes after being out of combat. Is that the health value of the armory? If you take the health down, it will always regenerate to full health, or it's just if you kill it, it'll always regenerate after 3 minutes.
So if you do manage to drop down to 1 health, but you don't attack it again for like 3 minutes, it will slowly regenerate back up to the full over the course of 3 minutes.
Okay.
Or basically, if it were at 1 health, it takes 3 minutes to get the max. If it's at like half health, it'll take a minute and a half.
I see. So it's basically 3 minutes from 0 to 100, but that will scale depending on how much damage you've done to it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's a decent small change there. Okay, damage of these turrets is all ramped up. So the damage is ramped up on every single turret, making them far more impactful and a lot more beefy, and also to be respected a bit more, because a lot of people often didn't respect turrets overall, and it will also be a bit of a shock to people who don't know these changes and try to make the same aggressive plays, that these turrets are going to hit you a hell of a lot harder. Vein Crystals has a more dynamic firing pattern. The damage is also up as well, because they didn't really feel super impactful sometimes, and the rupture stun duration is also up. So basically all defenses across the map are just significantly more impactful on 3.7.
Try to make it feel like, it's actually worth defending your objective, instead of cases where people feel helpless defending objective, and that kind of makes objective feel not like an objective. So we're trying to make it so that, if you are on the back foot and the enemy team is sieging, you have that chance to turn the fight around. All
right, and then 3v3, you've done the same thing there as well, just again to kind of keep that consistent across the board between both 5v5 and 3v3. Let's have a look at experience then. There's a lot of experience changes here. So, shared experience bonus is down, which means the 2v1s and the 2v sort of two-man clear jungles is going to be split a little bit. It's also split evenly among participants. So you're really, for lack of a better word, gimping split experience across the board, which means you could fall significantly behind in the game in terms of experience levels if you are sharing everything, which is, again, important, trying to discourage, I guess, the two-person jungle clears that are going on.
Right, so these changes are going to strictly, impact people who do the two-man shove lane, then two-man jungle kind of strategies, where you really want to have one person in lane at all times, because once you're starting to share experience, you are actually generally losing out. So you'll generally want to have someone soloing experience somewhere on the map, whether that is one of the 3 lanes or the jungle. If you're a captain, you're not going to be hurt that much, but if you start stacking, if you start missing sources of experience, let's say you just leave your lane and the lane is you're consistently losing jungle minions, just sharing the experience from jungle will not make up the experience that you're losing from the lane.
And so just explain these next set of changes for me, because it's a little difficult for me to understand from the numbers specifically. The scaling increase per level, obviously the trickle experience is fairly understandable going up, and the hero kill experience. So just explain the scaling increase per level and the hero kill experience and the intended design goals behind those.
The scaling increase per level is basically every single level currently on live, it takes 90 to hit level 2, 98 to hit level 3.
Okay, yeah.
Now it takes 90 and then 100. So just increasing that amount by 2 every single time, cumulatively.
Okay, so just making it slightly harder to gain those levels. And again, if you're trying to split experience across the board, that's going to hit you even harder now. So yeah, just making it harder to attain those levels. But maybe offset a little bit by the trickle experience that you're seeing coming through, just a little bit there. And the hero kill experience from 0 to 6, is this a rewarding players and giving them some catch-up mechanics and experience here?
It's both. It makes it so that if you are, being that star of the game and just destroying the enemy team, you will level up very, very quickly. However, you won't get so far ahead of your opponents because it kind of drops down very fast. If you're 2 levels above your opponents, you'll effectively get not that much experience. So if you're comparing like a level 6 to like a level 8, level 8 killing level 6 won't actually get that much experience. But if you are able to kill someone who is very far ahead of you, if a level 1 kills level 12, they'll basically get a whole level.
Ah, okay. Well, there you go. So, in case that happens. So, it allows you to snowball in the early game specifically, but obviously as you start to get more and more ahead, it will kind of limit that hero experience. You can't just farm heroes that are very significantly below you in levels, and also it allows you that catch-up mechanic as well. So, yeah, so it's good for both sides of the coin. And there's some experience for Blacklaw. So you get 15 for killing Blacklaw and capturing it. You get 15 for killing Blacklaw when it's on the enemy team. And you get 10 for killing Ghostwing. So a decent chunk of experience for all of the global objectives there. The jungle experience is going up slightly, but not enough to compensate for the reduction in shared jungle experience, but also to try and reward individual takes of those particular camps, I would guess.
For 3v3 specifically, 3v3 actually.
Oh, 3v3, yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't actually, that makes sure that everyone hits level 2 in the jungle.
Okay, yes. So that's just the changes to compensate for the 8 to 10, basically. Yeah. So your 3v3 jungle rotations will no longer will have not been impacted by these changes, essentially. Right. Let's have a look at gold. Maximum bounty is up to 1,000. Okay, wow, that definitely means that you can have plenty of combat gold available if you take down that key member. Minimum bounty is down to 40. Okay, so that gives you some bounty. Change per kill up by 100, change per assist 50 between all assisters, and change per death minus 40. So overall, just explain your ideas behind the gold changes here.
To do with gold here is that we want to make it much more about that star player on your team. You know, if you have a star player going off and they're accumulating bounties and just getting ahead of everyone, that, you know, if you kill the enemy star, your team, you know, you get a high five moment where everyone who put in the effort to, you know, take down that raid boss is rewarded appropriately. It also makes it so that games aren't decided on the worst player on your team, so that, you know, if you do have someone who's outmatched or is unable to, you know, catch back up, they are worth less a lot faster, so that the enemy team doesn't snowball off a single person.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you can go.
That's every solo queuer's dream. I was just about to say that's every solo queuer's dream right there. You know, it's if I do well, I'm rewarded, but I'm not going to be punished for someone on my team doing very poorly. Obviously, the enemy will still be able to snowball a little bit off a member who does poorly, but not as bad as before. Trying to temper that just a little bit. And also giving assist gold over up to 50%, which means captains are going to be clapping their hands because that's going to be hitting captain item spikes much quicker as well.
Yeah, so the captains are rewarded from here, and, you know, it's really about making those team moments happen and versus the star moments. So you're both incentivized to be that best player on your team, but you're also incentivized to work with the team to take out the best player on the enemy team.
Yeah, absolutely. And now looking at the jungle changes in 5v5 gold, essentially you're lowering the gold and transferring that over to the back camps, really. So you're lowering the gold in those front camps like the Weapon Guardian, the Crystal Guardian, and you're transferring it over to the back camps and lowering the jungle ambient gold down to 60%, which means, again, really trying to say, look, if you're going to duo jungle, you're going to get severely hampered in terms of your experience and gold income.
Yeah, so these were moved specifically so that, you know, the buffs that you want to be giving up, say like weapon or crystal, don't feel as bad when you give them up to your allies. You know, if you want to pass on the buff, you're not, you know, losing 100 gold, you're just losing 80 gold. And, you know, shifting the gold back onto the backer, or I guess like camps closer to your base, so that, you know, if the enemy is ahead and is able to, you know, buffs, which, you know, is now worth less gold as well, you're still able to take those higher gold values to try to catch back up despite losing the buffs.
I'm glad we heard the ambient San Mateo train in the background there, by the way, guys. If anyone has never been to the lair, by the way, it runs right next to a train track in San Mateo, so you sometimes get a train come by. I'm glad we got it.
Honestly, I don't even notice it anymore.
Yeah.
Until you mentioned it, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
You guys probably hear it all the time. Me when I was there, I was like, oh, there's a train. Okay. All right, moving on let's talk about the heroes now, because we are quickly going into Nivmet time territory here, which is means we've been talking a long time. Right, let's have a look at Anchor. Eviscerate will now basic attack the victim she blinks to unless cancelled. So I guess essentially when you use your A and you reactivate it, it will automatically basic attack unless you tap away to cancel that basic attack. Is that the idea there?
The original intention of the implementation is that, you know, you go to your enemy, but you don't necessarily want to auto attack because your auto attack has that important execute attached onto it.
Yep.
But it was creating some situations where it might have looked weird, where you know, blink to someone, now you're just kind of standing there. So now you have the option to move out of using your perk but you can also just let the perk fly if you choose not to do anything.
Well,
so it'll make playing Anka feel more smooth.
Yeah, well, those Aftershock Anka players like myself will thank you for that. Right, Dancer Blade's damage is down. Up across the board, but the crystal ratio is down. So really, one of the major things that Dancer Blades was good at, and this will not be impacted too much, is that you max Dancer Blades and you put a Shatterglass and you can basically one-shot waves. That shouldn't be impacted in the early game. So your first Shatterglass spike shouldn't impact your ability to clear the waves with Anka, but it just means as the game goes on, she's not going to scale as hard as she did previously. So slightly reducing your late game damage on Anka, but you're still going to be able to clear waves and roam easily when you hit the level 3 to level 5 with the Shatterglass spike. I think. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's the base damage was kind of wimpy on it before, so putting a little bit more damage on that was fine. Where this also prevents snowball-y oriented hero from just going off every game. So it's trying to slow down her snowball a little bit, but also increase her early game a little bit, so that we're not just strictly making her weaker.
Yeah, she was one of those feast or famine type heroes that if you didn't pop off on, often felt a little bit useless. So yeah, this is nice. It's a very small change. I don't think it's going to impact her too much, but overall, just making her a bit more consistent in the early game, especially. Yeah, the nerf to Baron I think is warranted. Baron was in a really strong position again. Yeah, the Baron was in a really strong position again last update. A lot of people playing him again. He was seeing very high sort of success rates, especially in high elo. I know especially 15% nerf is not as. It's basically in between where we were previously, and I think that's probably the perfect place for Baron.
He's pretty strong when he manages to jump in your team and just blast everyone, but this will make it just a little bit less painful, and it also means that his wave clear is not quite as strong as it was before. He's still gonna blow up waves pretty quickly, a little bit slower.
Yeah, I think this is probably a good place for Baron's perk, and I think again the Baron players that play Baron, they will definitely see a little bit of a drop off in teamfight damage. I still think he's going to be good, maybe not as super meta as he was previously though. Probably just one of those picks that if you really like playing Baron and he fits a certain composition, he can probably still work. Celeste Heliogenesis range is down by 0.5 across the board. Good, because Heliogenesis range was obnoxious. This is back to This was back to pre-5v5 ranges now then, with the 7-7-7-9. And so you will feel this as a Celeste player, but Heliogenesis range was obnoxious. 9 is still a good range. 9 is still a very, very long range. And whilst I think this will definitely impact Celeste a little bit, most of your good Celeste players can still function with her.
Yep. She basically was outranging almost everything, especially with Supernova. This just brings her more back into line with most other heroes.
Oh god, Fortress. He's already dead, guys. Come on. Fortress is already dead. Speed boost strength.
I think so, but
speed boost strength basically halved, and his lifesteal down by quite a considerable amount. Poor Fortress. I mean, his win rate has always been super high because I think he's like a noob stomper. Also, he's also just one of these heroes that if you pick and you go off in the early game, he will just, even captain or jungle, he will just he's really hard to play against because his engage is super strong and his burst damage is pretty good. But I actually don't think Fortress is that good of a pick. I genuinely don't like Fortress, but he's one of those solo queue picks that he thrives on uncoordinated teams. So he's just getting the nerf hammer because everybody sucks. That's the problem with Fortress. That's the problem with Fortress. He preys on people that suck, and now he's getting the nerf hammer for it.
He presses his ultimate, and life is good for him.
Yes. Yeah, oh, poor Fortress. He's still good. He'll still
be fantastic.
he will still be picked. That's the thing. He will still get picked because he's one of those people that picks off individual players, punishes people really hard. But yeah, let's nerf him some more, I guess. Not much to say about Fortress. Just poor Fortress. Grumpjaw now also hit the. Oh my god, best change you've made ever. Now
it's more of a quality of life change.
Yes. So. Trust me, I completely feel it. Don't you? You tell them about it, but I totally love this change.
things about Grumtry is that, especially when you use when you don't instacast your abilities, the reticle actually displays where he's going to move to, and you don't actually hit anything there at the moment. This makes it so that you do.
Basically, with
really
Grumtry, when you used your A, you had to aim like kind of in front of the target to actually hit them. So it kind of made it a bit counterintuitive. Because you were like not actually aiming where you wanted to go. You had to always like kind of temper your A. Yeah, I like this. This is good. Nice change for Grumtry.
Grumtry is pretty awesome right now, so we will be keeping an eye on him, but this is more a quality life thing than anything.
Yeah, I think Grumtry's a really good position right now. I love Grumtry. He's great. Stack timeout down on Kensei. Barrier duration down. Oh, you guys. Nivmet's out the door and suddenly you do the right thing. You nerf Kensei. Oh, sorry, Niv. I love you, by the way.
Hey, someone had to do it.
It's all we need to do is let Zekent off on the chain and finally nerf Kensei. I think you nerfed the right parts of his kit. Like, Kensei's was never really about his damage. It's just about the ridiculous barrier that he got, even with just one attack speed item. Like, he just was, it made him so sustain heavy, because the reason his damage felt bad is because he survived so long with his barrier that his breaking point stacks were so easy to get to 20 plus that it was just like, oh, Kensei's damage is overpowered. No, it's just that he gets breaking point stacks so ridiculously quickly. And his mobility is so high that he could just basically dive to the backline in a couple of rotations of abilities and then everybody died. So the barrier was what made him overpowered, and I'm glad to see the barrier duration getting cut pretty heavily here.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, trust me, I've had a lot of fun playing with banning Kensei almost every ranked game. This might actually make Kensei dealable in the late game, because you'll have a small time period between his barriers where even if you don't burst it down, he might not have that barrier for around half a second to a second, and that might be long enough for you to get that core damage down onto him that'll be able to kill him.
To make it so that you can really tell the difference between like really good Kensei players and people who are just like, okay with him, because if the players who are able to constantly keep that barrier up are going to still see a lot of success, but it will be much harder to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. That was just a reworked freak right there. Zekent. We could tell the difference between the great Kensei players and the good Kensei players. Right, we're going to have a look at Kestrel. Glimmer Shot, energy cost down, armor pierce up. So basically trying to bring that weapon power Kestrel back in. Like, weapon power Kestrel in North America was still a thing, but we just never touched it in Europe. This might actually make her weapon power variant a little bit more viable, especially.
The crystal power version of Kestrel is like pretty solid still.
Yeah.
I would love to still see her weapon form, because it is a very interesting style of play where you have both the sniper version of her where she is playing as Crystal versus the one that's much more focused on like positioning in the right place, constantly moving around fights, throwing those limit shots when needed, but still throwing out a lot of basic attacks.
Sure. Kinetic's attack range is down by a pretty decent amount, actually, 0.3. Kinetic was in a really annoying place where she had a decent amount of mobility for a weapon power carry, and that range made it difficult for her to sort of be caught up to. So this is going to make her a bit more vulnerable in teamfight situations. She's not going to be able to harass in lane as easily without overstepping, maybe to get punished. And yeah, I think this is a good change for Kensei, for Kinetic, because she was in a really strong position on her weapon power build.
Absolutely, and as you said, she was able to basically outrange most heroes, and bringing her down just a little bit means that she does have to come in a little bit hard into those engagements, and that is kind of her entire playstyle, where she's supposed to weave around fights, drop lows, A's, get those stacks up, and consistently do damage. She's not supposed to just set the complete edge of a fight, destroying you.
Yes, exactly. All right, the Finn changes. Basically, fortified health nerf across the board with a scaling nerf and a defense scaling. Finn was like sleeper OP with capacitor plate because of Polite Company. He actually had the highest win rate in the game on 3.5, I think. I'm not sure if it ran across for 3.6 as well, but he had a very high win rate, and capacitor plate was kind of sat on with Finn, and these are probably just some changes to reflect that capacitor plate is really good on him, and that made Polite Company really strong, and overall just needed a little bit of a tune down, especially for 5v5.
Absolutely, and realistically, this isn't actually a huge nerf because it's pretty hard to burn through that amount of fortified health anyway.
Yeah.
But this just means it is at least feasible now.
Sure. Oh, here we go. Some rhyme changes. Basic attack was bugged for the fortified health generation, and now you're actually going to generate fortified health with this basic attack. All those weapon power rhymes will love you. Their damage over time goes down by 20%, and Winter Spire damage. So you're actually nerfing rhyme. I'm guessing this is
fortified health.
Sorry, fortified health is because of the bug on basic attack. So basically, you're just trying to say, okay, well, we're the fortified health generation has to go down on his skills, otherwise he'll be generating way too much fortified health because he was bugged on his basic attack before. Is that the overall idea there?
It's exactly what we were doing.
Yeah, and I'm sure Rhymes will... Again, Rhymes still not in a great position for 5v5. He's probably the least played hero for 5v5, I would imagine. But at 3v3, this will definitely help him out. So if you're a 3v3 Rhyme player, you'll probably really enjoy this change. Reza fire starter damage is nerfed again. Yeah, Reza was in a strong position. I think this might affect his Aftershock spike a little bit because he did an insane amount of damage with Aftershock, but overall, probably a needed change because Reza's burst damage, especially in the early game, was pretty obnoxious.
Yeah, the big thing here is actually, it's not a huge change later on in the game, but for the first couple levels, this is like 10 damage early on is actually pretty substantial. 10 damage later on is basically nothing. So this will slow him down slightly.
Samuel's Drifting Dark sustain is nerfed a little bit. This was definitely a problem in the later stages of the game, especially. And especially with the cooldown nerfs to Drifting Dark over time, it's going to make Samuel have to really sort of be super careful about where he uses Drifting Dark and how he places his skill shots inside of it, just making sure that you can't just throw it out and expect to do well with it. So you just got to be a bit more careful about where you use it and how you place it, as well as using your skills inside that ability.
Right, just making sure that he's positioning himself in the correct place, and he has to be a little bit more wary about himself when he is being engaged on by a lot of opponents, because currently, if he just throws out that Drifting Dark, he is very, very, very hard to take down.
So the Saw spin up has been nerfed by 3% per stack. Again, everybody that hates playing against Saw, I'm sure will thank you. Saw was in like a kind of awkward position because Saw is always one of those picks that is never going to be like the best pick in the game, because I think thematically you could never make Saw a really good pick, like in terms of especially high level as well, because he's just obnoxious. Like if you made Saw a good pick, like he would just be too strong. So I also think, I guess, with the changes to the overall basic attack tune up when you did a couple of updates ago, this is just a sort of a residual change from that to make Saw a bit more in line with sort of where he was previously.
Right, this basically brings his attack speed back to where it was before. And realistically, it's not a huge nerf. It's about 30% at higher levels, but this is after he has like a good 300-some% attack speed.
Yeah.
Or like 160 or whatever.
All right, Silvernail's attack range goes down here. And I mean, look, I think Silvernail's heroic perk into heroic perk was obnoxious in lane, and I think, is it B? Is it his B? Yeah, his heroic perk B into heroic perk was like obnoxious in lane. So I think this is probably a good change, and it also means that he has to step a little bit further forward and more easily punishable. Just 0.2 might not seem like a lot, but it is a decent amount of attack range to get a nerf on.
Yeah, basically, as you pointed out, one of the big things I also know is he's all about positioning, and we really want to lean into that, where if he does set up good tripwires, he is able to still use his positioning and his attack range to kind of poke out enemies, but it does mean that he puts himself in a little bit more danger, where he is more easy to catch.
All right, let's have a look at Tony. Crystal ratio up on his trash talk. Badaboom's base damage down, but has given it a weapon power ratio and a crystal power ratio, where you fixed the bug where he actually had no scaling on that ability, and the knockback distance has been buffed or nerfed. I mean, it's really difficult to tell with the knockback distance because it's all about the user. So that could be a good thing or could be a bad thing depending on how good you are at Tony. But
you can knock him into your team, or you can save your opponents.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that it can be good or bad depending on the Tony player. But really, I think you're leaning into, again, trying to reinforce that to make Tony have that insane damage output, you want him to build damage as opposed to be that full utility Tony that we saw a lot of.
We want to make sure that if you do see a Tony building a lot of weapon, you have to be a little bit more wary about it, and it is much more reliant on those ratios. So he does have to actually build not just a spell sword; he has to build like spell sword and a sorrow blade or something.
And Varia, finally, you've basically slightly nerfed her ultimate to mean that especially in those hectic team fights, you're not going to get punished as hard for just a little bit of a misstep.
Buff?
Sorry, wait a second. Oh, sorry, yeah, so reduced damage. So you actually buffed it. So actually, if you don't pay attention to those markers on the ground, you're going to get punished more. Sorry, I read it the wrong way. Yeah.
That's that. It was mostly because, Varia, who is able to land good ults, say, in, like, Arden Gauntlet, you should really be, rewarded for landing those perfect ults where your opponents have nowhere to go. Whereas, like, before, it just felt kind of, like, wimpy. Like, you got an extra 25% damage, which is kind of, like, I mean, I guess I hit 2. So now you'll get more rewarded for hitting 2 or 3 or 4, etc.
Actually, there's something that just triggers in my mind is that often variant ultimates are just kind of thrown out with no real rhyme or reason because people are just like, well, most of my kit is focused on that basic attack or focused on using that spear. I'm not really bothered about my ultimate. People just threw it out before a team fight started just for the sake of it. Now, actually, if you time that ultimate, like you said, in those closed areas where you force the enemy into a specific choke point or you force the enemy into that angle, you're actually going to be rewarded for a good timing of the ultimate as well.
All right, you got a whole slew of item changes too. Why don't you just go over all of them and we'll just kind of talk a little about them at the end.
Yeah, because I'm not going to talk about talents because I hate talents. Right. So Aegis, Aftershock. Okay, so Aegis, the shield is up. Aftershock, the max damage versus non-heroes. It's not a 1% Niv-Met nerf, but actually I think it's a pretty good change to Aftershock overall, but we'll talk about that afterwards. Bonesaw weapon power is up by 10. Metal Jacket armor is up. Pulse Weave total cost increased by 300 gold. It was a pretty good item, definitely dominating meta in the sort of top ends of solo queue as well. Serpent's Mask weapon power down to 85. Thank the Lord. It was a ridiculous item. Spell Sword, 2,500, just giving it a 50 gold cutoff, which I guess you can somehow tell me why that's important. So let's start off with the Metal Jacket and the Aegis changes there. So the defense increases. You very recently, this year anyway, nerfed defenses. Is this just kind of bringing that back, saying, well, actually, we want these to be more impactful when you pick them up as a defensive item?
Especially because players are not building Aegis and Metal Jacket that much, especially because Slumbering Husk is so good.
Yes.
This just means that you have a little bit more consistent defense if you want to opt into these 2 items instead.
For sure. Let's talk about the Aftershock changes here. The max damage versus non-heroes. So basically meaning that you're not going to be able to use it to burst down the big neutral objectives as quickly. It's not going to be as good versus those big, beefy, high health targets.
Actually twofold. So it does affect your objective takings of, like, say, Black Claw or Ghostwing. Aftershock is a really good item just overall. Yep. But it's also in conjunction with turret changes where we're making turrets more, we're giving turrets more health but reducing their armor and shield so that your ability to take down a turret is less dependent on having shield or armor piercing. So that Aftershock is also not just devastating those turrets.
Okay, so it's a bit of a conjunction overall. So Aftershock's still going to be a great item because, again, it's kind of a build-defining item for a lot of heroes, and I think you don't want to tweak it too much because it just works so well with so many heroes that you have in the game. But it's just good sort of, again, compensating for those turret changes. You don't want to have someone build Aftershock and just rip through those turrets despite, trying to make them more impactful, so I get that. Bonesaw weapon power up is probably one of the least built weapon power items in the game right now because the fact that armor just wasn't being built, really. Is this just trying to entice people to say, well, actually, maybe if they get a Metal Jacket, you can consider Bonesaw?
Exactly, and Bonesaw is still reasonably good. Like, every single hero has some amount of base armor and whatnot, but this will mean that if you do opt into Bonesaw, especially if you see your opponents building an Atlas Pauldron, or even a Slumbering Husk or Metal Jacket, it will still be fairly effective, and it just means that you won't be completely useless while like killing minions and jungle monsters and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a pretty solid weapon power carry build that if you picked up Bonesaw now alongside Serpent's Mask, it kind of levels out the overall weapon power discrepancy between the two. And then you can make that decision between adding it into as a 4th item with the Tornado Trigger or just foregoing Tornado Trigger and having Bonesaw instead. And looking for a more sustained heavy build with the breaking point. So I think that could be a genuinely good addition to some weapon power carry builds.
Right. We just want to make sure that every single item feels like it has its place, especially because, as you mentioned, Bonesaw was one of those items that was very uncommonly picked. Yes. We want to make sure people take it up a little bit more often.
All right, Pulse Weave. The cost has gone up by 300 gold, so just over 10%. What are you... 15%.
I'm sure it's not too surprising to people. Pulse Weave is incredibly powerful. The sheer amount, the move speed that it gives, in addition to the passive that it has, being able to allow a lot of heroes that normally are just building tanky to do a pretty substantial amount of damage, and also the gigantic slow. It came into people's builds a little bit too early, so we're just increasing the price of it just a little bit too. If you want to opt into Pulse Weave, you do have to wait just a little bit longer.
This item single-handedly made Flicker good, by the way. This item single-handedly... Like, this is... the only people I've ever seen play Flicker at high elo played it with Pulse Weave and just, like, hard engage, run at them, be super tanky, then go invisible and do the same thing all over again. Yeah, I mean, all credit to you for creating an item to make a useless hero good. Thanks, guys. Well done. Serpent's Mask, weapon power cut by 15. Serpent's Mask was in a really strong position where almost every weapon power carry in the game was buying it. I think you probably did need to address that.
Outclassed Starblade in like every aspect. Like it didn't do more damage, but it made it so like you could do more damage because you just didn't die.
Yeah, I agree.
And the sheer amount of damage it gave was a little bit too much.
And I think people picked it up because the Poison Shiv nerfs basically felt that everyone was like, oh, Poison Shiv's like a utility item, which, to be honest, I've always thought Poison Shiv should be. I've always thought Poison Shiv should be a utility item, not just your go-to lifesteal item. So I think overall now you're going to have some more meaningful decisions to make. Oh, we love that word, meaningful decisions, but meaningful decisions to make between Sorrow Blade, Poison Shiv, and Serpent's Mask, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the Spell Sword. Please tell me the Spell Sword 50 gold buff. What was the thinking here?
I've picked up on quite a lot of heroes, but it always felt like, we didn't really want to increase the amount of damage that gave or change the stats much. I feel like marginally too weak, so just a small bump to it to make it a little bit more desirable.
I can't wait to get that 3 seconds earlier than I did previously. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, that's one whole minion kill.
Okay, so that is the end of the... We're not going to go through talent changes because I don't care about talents. I'm sorry, YouTube friends, if you care about talents.
No problem.
So, at the end of this all, like, is there anything else that you want to add that you sort of feel like you haven't covered just at the end of this particular discussion?
Have a lot more changes, coming in the near patches. This is a pretty big change, as it is a seasonal update. But we do have, other changes that are on board with the meta changes that we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, and you can look forward to those as well.
Yeah, basically we have a lot of changes coming. I'm really excited to see how the meta shakes out after this update, and especially with all the stuff we have planned for the coming few updates. See how Vainglory is shaped in the coming months. And so, as always, make sure you guys give us your feedback. Like, it helps us a lot. I love, chatting with you, Excoundrel. And I am looking forward to, just seeing how everything comes together in the next few months.
Yeah, guys, remember you can tweet Zekent. He's on Twitter. I'm sure he reads them at some point. You've got Twitter as well, Sonata, right? You've got Twitter.
I do now with like 20 followers. It's great.
Yeah, nice. I will make sure that if you want to tweet them, you can tweet me, and I'll always forward that on. And also, you can find them on Twitter pretty easily. Well, also, if you comment in the YouTube description below, not the description, that's where I comment. In the YouTube comments, you guys can send some useful feedback to me, and I'll always forward that on, and I'm sure Zeke and Sonata will have a read of them when the video goes live anyway. So thanks, guys. That's been wonderful. I loved having your insight, and I'm sure everybody listening loved having the insight as well. Really looking forward to seeing how the 5v5 meta shapes up and how we develop over the course of the year. And that's everything, guys. See you later.